Welcome to the PMI-ACP Domain 1 Agile Principles and Mindset Training. The Iron Triangle, also known as the Triple Constraint, it is made up of the three most significant constraining factors for projects. With a traditional project, the scope is typically fixed. The project must deliver a certain product with all of the agreed upon features. The costs and the schedule of delivery can frequently vary to ensure that the scope gets delivered. With an agile or adaptive project, the idea is to fix the schedule and the cost. You deliver as much value as you can afford within the time limit you have. The scope adapts as a result. The flexibility this creates is that if a product is not delivering value, the project can be stopped. You can begin with a set budget and gain as much value from that budget as possible. It is important to remember for the exam that projects don't have to be purely predictive or purely agile. It is more of a continuum. Predictive projects are also known as traditional or waterfall. The work is heavily planned up front and does not offer much room for changes later. The work is segmented and sequenced in a predictable flow, like a waterfall. Once you go over the edge, it is hard to go back or change direction. Iterative projects allow uncompleted work to be assessed at key points so that changes can be made to that work. This gives iterative projects some adaptability. This is one way to create a feedback loop. Incremental projects will release partial work for use. As long as a partial product is usable, it can be released. This creates an early delivery of value. Adaptive projects use feedback loops and early value delivery to help adapt to changes in the project path and the market. Planning is not done in detail until the details are needed to create the product. This is known as progressive elaboration. In this section, we will cover Lean. Lean itself is not an agile project approach, framework, or methodology. Lean is used heavily in manufacturing as part of lean manufacturing. It consists of 8 types of waste and has 7 core concepts. It may be beneficial to think of Agile as a subset of Lean. Agile works to bring in many of the characteristics of Lean, and the Agile frameworks bring in characteristics from Agile. With this model, we can visualize how Agile relates to Lean and what we can learn from Lean to improve Agile. There are 7 core concepts to Lean. Eliminate waste, amplify learning, decide later, deliver fast, empower the team, build integrity in, see the whole. Lean 7 core concepts explained. Eliminate waste. By minimizing waste, we can maximize the value. Amplify learning. Gain feedback from the customers through increased collaboration. Decide later. Decisions should be deferred as long as responsibly possible. Deliver fast. Maximize the return by gaining value quicker. Empower the team. Give the team the tools and environment they need to actually be effective in their job. Build integrity in testing is more than a one-and-done exercise that is done at the end of a project. See the whole. Bring in systems thinking and visualize the entire system, not just the parts of the system. There are 8 types of lean waste. Transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overprocessing, overproduction, defect, and skills that are underutilized. Examples of waste can include poor communication, building features that no one asked for, defect in the code, multitasking or task switching, and even having too many specialists on the team in one area that causes their skill to go to waste. Scrum is one of the most widely used Agile frameworks. As a result, it will be a large part of the PMI-ACP exam. Scrum is a lightweight framework intended for developing and sustaining complex products. From the Scrum Guide, Scrum is lightweight, simple to understand, and difficult to master. This section will go over the 3 pillars to the Scrum philosophy, the 5 values of Scrum, the Scrum framework, and the 3 roles on the Scrum team. The 3 pillars of the Scrum philosophy are transparency, inspection, adaptation. Transparency is about the ability for everyone to see the progress of the project or product development. Information should not be hidden but should be easily and readily available for all to view. With inspection, the product should be able to be inspected by all the stakeholders. Learn where the product is currently at and discuss where it can be. Finally, adaptation. Once inspected, you need to be flexible and adapt to changes. If the inspection revealed flaws or ideas for improvement, you need to be able to adapt to that and change the future plans. The 5 values of Scrum are respect, commitment, courage, focus, and openness. These values are meant to bring back the focus to the 3 pillars. For example, being transparent with someone shows a commitment and focus to being open. It can also show courage and respect if being transparent highlights bad news about the project's current state. More will be discussed later about the artifacts and events of the Scrum framework. For now, the Scrum framework is made up of a product backlog, a sprint planning ceremony, the sprint backlog, the daily Scrum, a sprint review ceremony, a sprint retrospective ceremony, and a potentially releasable of done product called an increment. This shows an overview of the Scrum framework as a visual model. This image was created by Scrum.org, an organization that certifies and educates people specifically in the Scrum framework, and they work on maintaining the Scrum Guide. For the purposes of the PMI-ACP exam, it would not hurt to read through the Scrum Guide as you will encounter Scrum-related questions. This model shows the flow of events of Scrum. You begin with an evolving product backlog and move into the sprint with sprint planning. In sprint planning, you create the sprint backlog. Once the sprint backlog is created, you move on to creating the product or doing the work selected for inclusion in the sprint backlog. During this time period, you will partake in a daily meeting called the Daily Scrum. At the end of the sprint, you will review the work output of the sprint with stakeholders. It is then that you will carry out a retrospective ceremony and begin the process of the sprint all over again. The Scrum team should be self-organizing, cross-functional, and they will deliver a product iteratively and incrementally. The team has 3 roles: the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. There is no designated project manager in Scrum. However, it is important to note that Scrum does not define Agile. Other frameworks do have a project manager role. Scrum is a product development framework that can be used for projects due to the creation of a unique product resulting from a project. Product owner. The product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product and the work of the development team. They are also accountable for maintaining and prioritizing the product backlog. Although they may delegate some of this work, accountability for the product backlog ultimately lies with the product owner. Development team. This is a role that applies to multiple people. The development team is made up of the people who do the work of creating and delivering a potentially releasable increment of a done product at the end of the sprint. They have no titles and there are no sub-teams. Accountability for completing the work belongs to the whole team. The size of the team is between 3 to 9 people. Scrum Master. The Scrum Master's role is to act as a coach and facilitator for the Scrum team. They are responsible for ensuring the team understands and enacts Scrum, including helping the product owner understand their role in maintaining the backlog and the development team in self-organizing practices. The Scrum Master is a servant leader that empowers the team. They also coach those outside the team in Agile practices. Scrum artifacts include the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. The product backlog is an ordered list of what is currently expected to be included in the product. It can change and evolve as new information becomes known. The sprint backlog contains the current product backlog items that are being worked on in the current sprint. It comprises the work being done during a sprint. The increment is the potentially releasable product at the end of a sprint. It is all of the items in the sprint backlog that were brought to a done state. How do you know when your work is completed? The definition of done defines when an item from the backlog has been completed. A done items becomes usable and potentially releasable. Only done items can be included in the increment. This may often be defined by the members of the development team if the organization does not define it. A solid definition of done should include all things that are required for a high-quality increment. This would include integration with prior increments and testing. The Scrum events are the things that happen during Scrum. They include the sprint and the ceremonies. The Scrum events are the sprint planning, the daily Scrum, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. The sprint is time-boxed to 1 month or less. It is during the sprint that a done and potentially releasable increment is created. Sprint lengths should be consistent. If you chose a 2-week length of time for a sprint, then all sprints should be 2 weeks in length. There are no gaps between sprints. A new sprint begins immediately after the end of the prior sprint. Things may change during a sprint as new things are learned. Items contained in the sprint backlog may need to be removed or clarified. Nothing should happen that endangers the creation of a potentially releasable increment or the sprint goal. If the goal of the sprint becomes obsolete, it may be cancelled and a new sprint should begin immediately. Only the product owner may cancel a sprint. Sprint planning. Sprint planning is a ceremony that occurs at the beginning of a sprint. It is a time-boxed meeting that lasts a maximum of 8 hours for a month-long sprint. It can be shorter if the sprints are shorter. The result of the sprint planning should include answering 2 questions: the what and the how. What will be worked on? The product owner and the development team will discuss items to include in the sprint. Only the development team may assess and decide on what can be accomplished in the sprint. This will become the sprint goal. How will the sprint goal become accomplished? The team will discuss and plan, then they will explain how they expect to accomplish the sprint goal. Daily Scrum. This is a 15-minute time-boxed ceremony or meeting that may also be known as the daily stand-up meeting. There are 3 main questions development team members should answer. What did I accomplish yesterday? What am I going to accomplish today? What are potential impediments to my progress? The Scrum Guide no longer recognizes a requirement for the 3 questions, but offers them as a suggested format. For the purposes of the PMI-ACP exam, it is best to remember the questions. The daily Scrum is a meeting that is intended for the development team and the development team only. It is a way for them to coordinate their activities. The Scrum Master should only ensure that it is occurring and that it is being conducted properly. The product owner and the Scrum Master do not have to attend. In fact, no one but the development team should attend. If others do attend, they are asked to remain quiet to let the development team do the work. They may not ask questions of the development team. If they wish to discuss things with the development team, that should be included with a different meeting and not be a part of the daily Scrum. Sprint Review. This is a 4-hour time-boxed ceremony for 1-month sprints. This is a meeting for the product owner to bring in the customers and inspect the increment created during the sprint. The development team demonstrates the work they completed during the sprint and are provided feedback based on the completed work. The product owner may choose to accept or reject the increment based on customer feedback. Additionally, there should be some discussions about adapting the product backlog to suggested changes or improvements. The sprint review occurs near the end of the sprint. Sprint retrospective. The sprint retrospective is a 3-hour-long time-boxed ceremony or meeting for a month-long sprint. It can be shorter if the sprint is shorter. It is held after the sprint review but before the beginning of the next sprint. It should be the very last event of the sprint. The purpose of the sprint retrospective is similar to a lessons learned meeting. You should identify what went well and what did not go so well. For those items that did not go well, a plan should be made to improve them. By the end of the meeting, the team should have identified some improvement items that can be implemented in the next sprint. This section will cover Kanban. Kanban is not heavily present on the exam, but you may receive questions on it. Your knowledge of Kanban does not need to be deep. Something to remember, Kanban is much more than just a visual board for organizing your project tasks. You don't even require a Kanban board. Kanban just requires a visual method, and the Kanban board is an easy way to implement that visual requirement. The idea behind Kanban is to create a very visual system that helps spot bottlenecks in the process flow. Kanban offers more control over the workflow by limiting work in progress. For the exam, it likely isn't necessary to understand all of the features of line theory and Little's Law, but I will provide a brief overview. Kanban's use as an agile methodology was based on just-in-time manufacturing, a part of lean manufacturing. Many, however, disagree with Kanban being regarded as an agile methodology due to differences between other agile approaches and Kanban. Rest assured, Kanban is very adaptive and is probably more agile than those other approaches. Kanban has 5 core practices and relies on what is known as a pull system. If you think about a line, say a line in a grocery store waiting to check out, one person at a time is getting their groceries totaled up and paying. Once they are done, they exit the line and each person moves up one spot. If the flow of customers to the store increases, the line gets longer, the average duration of time spent in the line increases, and the cashier's work in progress increases. This seems fairly logical. You put more people in line and it takes them longer to get through the line. The customers can then become restless. Perhaps they leave after an hour in the line and go somewhere else. The psychological implications on the cashier of the long line, the one doing the work, may additionally cause him or her to slow down. They see this huge amount of work and come to the conclusion that they will never make any progress. Maybe they go home frustrated and dream of quitting their job. What can be done about this? You could try limiting the number of people in line and make the overall process smoother for everyone involved. This is where Little's Law comes in. The basic formula for Little's Law in relation to Kanban is WIP equals throughput multiplied by cycle time. Little's Law helped to prove the idea behind JIT manufacturing and JIT delivery through the study of people standing in lines. Little's Law shows that a relationship exists between the average number of people in a line, their rate of arrival to the line, and the average time spent in the line. Taiichi Ohno, the man who thought up just-in-time manufacturing, began to view manufacturing processes like a supply chain for a grocery store. The preceding process being the supplier for the process next in line. If one process was not ready to consume the efforts of the prior process, then the prior process must stop producing. In this way, the rate of demand controlled the rate of production. This creates the pull system effect. You pull the items through the process flow. If the last process needs input from the prior process, it pulls in that input, creating a chain reaction down the line that keeps processes producing. The 5 core practices of Kanban are: define and visualize the workflow, Limit work in progress. Measure and manage flow. Make process policies explicit. Use models to aid improvement. Kanban has several key differences with other Agile practices. Kanban relies on a continuous flow of work rather than defined and time-boxed iterations. A key metric in Kanban is the cycle time. Think back to line theory. Cycle time would be how fast one can get through the line. Many Agile variants use velocity. The release methodology is incremental, much like other Agile approaches, but the incremental releases operate more in a continuous flow rather than at the end of iterations. We will now cover Extreme Programming or XP. Extreme Programming brings in the technical best practices for software engineering and application development. It has 5 core values, 12 practices, and is made up of 4 roles. The extreme programming life cycle is very similar to Scrum, and it could be said that Scrum is pretty much XP without the technical best practices. The unfinished features is just a product backlog, and the most important features should be the ones that get worked on first. You move into iterative planning and continue on with the iteration. Your goal, as in Scrum, is to release an increment of working product. You can learn more details about XP at www.extremeprogramming.org. The extreme programming core values are simplicity, communication, feedback, courage, and respect. It is quite possible that you will receive a question on the exam about the 12 practices of extreme programming. These are the technical best practices that XP uses to help ensure a quality product. They are pair programming, planning game, test-driven development or TDD, whole team, continuous integration, refactoring, small releases, sustainable pace, collective code ownership, coding standard, simple design, and system metaphor or allegory. Pair programming has 2 developers working together at a computer. One writes code and one watches. They may switch back and forth throughout the day. The intent is to have them work together and help each other to produce higher quality code than one person alone. Planning game is used to help increase collaboration with the customer. During iteration planning, the customer and the developers work together to select user stories to be included in the iteration. The idea is to make it into a game when estimating the level of effort required. Test-driven development is a practice where you write the test first. For example, if you require a program to perform addition, you might write test scenarios that require the program to add 2 plus 2 and have it get the correct answer of 4 with a successfully completed test. You then write code to make sure that you can pass those tests. Whole team is referenced to co-location. The whole team sits together. This is typically a team of generalizing specialists. Continuous integration is an application development best practice where you continuously test and integrate new code into the code base. Typically, an automated system is used to help speed up and refine this process. Code gets check-in and integrated, testers then test. In this way, you can spot defect faster with smaller amounts of code changes to look through. Refactoring is the practice of cleaning up code. As time goes on, no matter how careful you are, code quality will start to degrade and technical debt will accrue. Many best practices can slow this down and help, but refactoring is needed to get rid of it. Carrying out regular refactoring can ensure the long-term and continued quality of the code. Small and frequent releases carry a few advantages. This practice provides small and shorter feedback loops which can make a team more adaptable. As with continuous integration, problems can be spotted sooner and corrected faster. It can also reduce the need for refactoring, helping to keep routine refactoring time shorter. No one really benefits from working long hours. Sustainable pace is about ensuring that when working on an iteration, no one is spending 12 hours a day, 7 days a week writing code. Long hours of work causes errors to go up and code quality to go down. Developers burn out, then they quit and look for new jobs. Collective code ownership is about everyone being responsible for the code that is developed. Everyone owns the quality of the code and is responsible for making sure it is free of defect. Everyone must also adhere to a coding standard. Developers, if left unchecked, may use different methods to get their work done or be okay with varying levels of quality. This can cause issues when one developer works on another developer's code, and it can create inconsistent code quality and methods. Simple design is about finding the simplest way of doing something. Rather than long convoluted solutions, work to maximize the value of your work and keep the solutions small and to the point. In this way, you can avoid wastes due to overproduction of the code. System metaphor is the act of creating a shared understanding of the work among team members. They may develop simple names for chunks of code or practices, or create standardized naming conventions so that without knowing what something is, you can gain background on it just by seeing the name. The four roles of XP are the coach, the customer, the developers, and the testers. The coach is similar to the Scrum Master in Scrum. They mentor the team on Agile practices and work to remove impediments to progress. The customer is similar to the product owner in Scrum. The customer ensures that the most important features are put up to be worked on during the iteration. The developers and the testers are similar to the development team in Scrum. Together, they are responsible for ensuring that the features get developed and an increment of the product can be released. XP has some additional common practices. User stories are a way to describe a feature of the product from the perspective of someone using the product. The common format is, as a user, I want to be able to see inventory levels so that I can ensure that the customer gets the correct products. There are two types of spikes, or iterations, that are not intended to release a piece of usable product. Both types of spikes carried out when the team may need to learn more about the product they are building. This section will cover feature-driven development. Feature-driven development has 5 main steps and is built on a set of core best practices to optimize the value for the customer. Feature-driven development is product development that is focused on the features desired. Develop an overall model. Client and the development team make a general model. Point-by-point domain models are made, and after that, these models are continuously converged into one high-level model. Guided by a chief architect, team members get a decent comprehension of the total model. Build a features list. Data accumulated in the first step is grouped into subject areas and sets of related features. The entire project becomes a series of features grouped by this features list. A features list should be conveyed and examined at regular intervals. The goal is to try and break things down into what can be accomplished within a 2-week iteration. Plan by feature. Arrange the features into a clear development plan. Assign sets of features to feature set owners or teams of people responsible for completing the feature. Design by feature. General designs of the elements are completed and class and strategy preambles are composed. Build the feature. After the design inspection, class owners begin assembling and executing every one of the things essential to help the design. The code is produced, tested, and inspected. When fully approved, the finished feature is packaged and added to the whole product. Feature-driven development has several best practices. In many ways, these mirror the principles of other Agile approaches. Feature-driven development is a model-driven, short-emphasis process. Before the process starts, the general model shape is built up. The development of features is then on track with a progression of 14-day design by feature, work by feature cycles. Above all, the features are little helpful according to the client results. Developers focus on the features that are vital to the client. When it comes to individual code ownership, FDD has some differences with XP. Extreme programming has the idea of aggregate property, where any developer can refresh any code, including source code, whenever required. FDD instead has explicit developers accountable for the code classes, so if a feature expects changes, the owners of each one of those classes meet up, make changes independently to their designated class, and then join the code together. When it comes to inspection in FDD, features are arranged and created one by one as gradual units. Developers can see the results and execution in a brief span in reality at regular intervals. It helps in quality control and empowers the developers to show signs of improvement and gain a grasp on the total process. In this section, we will cover Dynamic Systems Development Methodology, or DSDM. Where Scrum is intended for product development, DSDM is explicitly built for project management. It is full life cycle project management framework with controls on the beginning of a project and the closing of a project. DSDM is one of the oldest forms of Agile and evolved from the rational unified process. It is comprised of 8 core principles and a robust and detailed framework. In many ways, it resembles a traditional project with traditional project roles. The key difference in DSDM compared to a traditional project are the iterations or evolutionary development cycles. DSDM suggests using a prioritization method called MOSCO in order to get the minimum usable subset or the minimum viable product. DSDM is maintained by the Agile Business Consortium. According to them, the best business value emerges when projects are aligned to clear business goals, deliver frequently, and involve the collaboration of motivated and empowered people. DSDM relies on an ethos of common sense and pragmatism. Common sense is the sound practical judgment independent of specialized knowledge or training, normal native intelligence. Pragmatism is action or policy dictated by consideration of the immediate practical consequences rather than by theory or dogma. This makes up the philosophy of DSDM. The principles of DSDM. 1. Focus on the business need. Establish the business case through the business need perspective and align the business case to organizational goals and priorities. Validate the business commitment through frequent delivery of results. 2. Deliver on time. Time box work activities and allocate time periods to complete the work. Hit deadlines to build trust in the process. Keep the focus on what is needed to ensure that there are no unnecessary delays. 3. Collaborate. Involve the right people at the right time. Bring in subject matter experts when they are needed and their skills can be best utilized. Actively involve business representatives by inviting their input into the project output. Empower the team and remove top-down approach decision-making practices. 4. Never compromise quality. Continuously review quality goals and the current level of quality. Review these goals with the team and regular intervals. Decide as a team on the minimum level of acceptable quality at the beginning and ensure that the team adheres to it. Frequent testing should be conducted throughout the process. 5. Build incrementally from firm foundations. Hold conversations regularly to show the current solution state and allow for input from project stakeholders. In this way, you help to verify that the solution is correct and meeting expectations. You may have to adjust and reassess priorities to maintain the viability of the project. 6. Develop iteratively. Allow detail to emerge later, rather than a strong detailed definition at the beginning. Recognize that the process is fluid and not locked in. 7. Communicate continuously and clearly. Encourage effective and informal meetings. Quality and communication need to be a focus. Additional inputs and suggestions from stakeholders should also be encouraged. Visual modeling should be used to help maintain transparency. Documentation should be on a just enough basis, maintaining the minimum levels needed. 8. Demonstrate control. Proactively manage the project, continuously evaluating progress. Moscow prioritization is a technique for managing the features that will be included during evolutionary development. The most important items are the must-have items. These are tasks that must be included in order to meet the requirements. They may be customer or legal requirements. Should-have items are somewhat important, but they may not be vital to the success of the iteration. Could-have items are items that are still wanted, but their necessity is not present. Things likely won't break and everything should function fine without them. Won't have this time are items that will not be included within the current time frame. This is a model of the DSDM life cycle. The pre-project phase ensures that only the right projects are started and that they are set up correctly, based on a clearly defined objective. The feasibility and foundations phases begin much of the opening project work found in traditional project management. The evolutionary development phase is where the iterative development occurs. This phase and the deployment phase are continued until all items have been completed. When completed, the project is closed out. The business sponsor is committed to project and proposed solution, committed to approach for delivering project, works to resolve business issues and make financial decisions, responsible for business case and project budget. The business visionary provides a clear vision and strategic direction, interprets and communicates business needs of sponsor and ensures these needs are represented in business case, ensures solution will enable business benefits. The technical coordinator is the technical authority for projects, providing technical vision, ensures project is technically coherent and meets agreed standards. The project manager is the high-level Agile-style servant leadership to solution development team SDT, focus on managing the working environment for evolving solution. The business ambassador is responsible for day-to-day communication between project and business. They are a business representative on the solution development team. The business analyst ensures business needs are properly analyzed and correctly reflected in the evolution of the solution. A solution developer interprets business requirements and translates them into a deployable solution. A solution tester performs testing in accordance with the agreed-upon strategy. A team leader ensures that the team functions as a whole and meets objectives. They work with the team to plan and coordinate all aspects of product delivery at the detailed level. They are ideally elected by the team to lead through the current stage of the project. A business advisor provides specific or specialist input to development or testing of the solution. May be an intended user or beneficiary of the solution, or they may provide legal or regulatory advice for compliance. A technical advisor provides specific or specialist technical input to the project, often advising from the perspective of those responsible for operational management, support, or ongoing maintenance of the solution. A workshop facilitator carries out the planning, organizing, and managing workshop processes. The DSDM coach helps teams with limited experience to get the most benefit from DSDM within context and constraints of their organization. You can find more information at the websites below or in the Agile Practice Guide from PMI. This concludes the PMI-ACP Domain 1 Agile Principles and Mindset Training.